Well, Occupy Wall Street is still going on, still going strong in New York City. Friday of the third week that we've seen protesters ranging from hundreds camping out to thousands on the streets, speaking out against inequality and over grievances towards the financial system and, of course, Wall Street. Now, this movement continues to grow. We've seen demonstrations in cities including St. Louis, Dallas, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia. You're seeing them behind me in Boston, too, all over. We've seen a sympathetic movement protesting in Washington, D.C. this week as well. And our viewers have been sending us stuff. Chad Settlemyer, I hope I pronounced his name right, but we do appreciate him, even if I slaughtered it. He sent us these photos of Occupy Portland. You can see right there, you have the GOP has a coke addiction, I guess talking about the Koch brothers. What else did he see out there? I know we have some other shots. Obviously some criticism of the rich right there, and more, criticism towards the rich. So this is a sentiment we're seeing from Wall Street to Portland, Oregon, obviously, east to west coast, all over. We appreciate him for sending us those pictures on the ground, and we definitely want you to send us your stuff. If you have videos or pictures, you can post it on our Facebook page at facebook.com/RTAmerica. You can also tweet us at RT_America, and also you can reply with videos as a YouTube comment on any of our YouTube videos, and we'll check out your stuff and hopefully get some of that on air or on our website. So all of this is still going on, and protesters are still in Lower Manhattan, and the corporate media today is not paying too much attention. I mean, maybe they've shown some shots here or there, but in passing, not focusing on it. And a lot of other stories are getting a lot more attention. This isn't getting top billing. So RT interviewed hip-hop artist Talib Kweli about Occupy Wall Street to see what he had to say about the media.
Our job in the media and as people who will participate in the media have to spread the word and have to get people thinking about why would this amount of people come and spend this time here? Why would they do that? There's got to be a reason.
There's got to be a reason. Earlier I asked Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks what it may be. I asked his opinion because he's been critical of mainstream media coverage of Occupy Wall Street. I asked if he thinks that the corporate media could or would ever be able to cover this in what we call properly, with the comprehensive resources, time, and attention that a story like this deserves.
Well, there's two different aspects to that. One is whether they want to cover it properly, and of course Fox News isn't going to want to do that at all. When the Tea Party, gets up in colonial outfits and goes and, and sometimes you remember people were showing up with guns outside of President Obama's speeches. Fox News is ecstatic about that. But when somebody actually protests the banks, they despise it because their job is to protect the rich. So, of course, Fox News doesn't want to do that. The rest of the corporate media is just, part of the establishment, honestly. And so they view any threat to the establishment, which is certainly Occupy Wall Street's a real threat. They view it with some degree of disdain. First they didn't want to cover it, then they covered it with disdain. So I'm not sure they want to. Now, if they wanted to, do they have the resources for it? Well, that's a good question. They have a lot of resources, but do they direct it towards a lot of investigative reporting or any kind of reporting? Usually not. I mean, what's the last story that CNN broke?
Right. Well,
I don't remember it.
Well, I don't know, but you bring up a good point. It would be so simple for them, right? I mean, when you look at the Emmy Awards last year, for example, for news, a lot of them went to that Miracle on the Hudson story, which was that emergency landing of the plane on the Hudson River. It was right in the backyard of all the networks. They all rushed out to cover it. Occupy Wall Street obviously is too. It's going on continuously. It has lots of interesting characters. So when do we see the sit down with Katie Couric or the organizers on the Today Show?
Well, I hope that happens soon. I don't know why the Today Show wouldn't book it unless they had issues with, hey, you know what, this makes people in powerful places uncomfortable. Now, and this should be within their wheelhouse. We're not asking them to do a lot. I mean, think about it. The news coverage goes to events where all you got to do is show up with a camera. I mean, CNN has basically become the camera news network, right? They're not going to actually do any investigative reporting. Again, that might upset people. What they do is they show up with cameras. Okay, great. Now we got Occupy Wall Street, we got Occupy LA, Chicago, etc. Can you do the very least, which is show up with cameras?
Right. I mean, there's so many opportunities, and they do show up with cameras, some of them, to be fair. It's just, I think, the comprehensive nature of the coverage, which is kind of what you're talking about, and the way that it's covered, or the disdain. But nonetheless, it continues, and many people have come out in support. You've come out in support, said that the protesters are awesome, I think were your words. And people like Reverend Jesse Jackson today is saying this is the cause of our time. But then there's a question of turning protests into actual power. What do you think these protests can actually accomplish?
Look, I think the #1 goal of all this is to make sure that we get the influence of corporate money out of politics. Because, you know, Fox News, et cetera, are doing their damnedest to try to smear all these people by saying that they're just generally against all business or against capitalism or against America, which is absurd. They're trying to regain our democracy here. Well, all that we're saying is that we need to get that corporate money out of politics so they don't buy our politicians, so that we can get our democracy back. Doesn't mean that you should shut down the banks. It just means you shouldn't let the banks buy the senators. I think that's a very simple request, and I think that's what all of this should be eventually driving towards.
And you do see that being one of the main rallying cries of these protesters. At the same time, you see other groups joining in. You have unions that have joined the protests and joined in support. The Transit Workers Union, the SEIU, New York City Workers Union, purportedly the Teamsters. Of course, when unions turn out, they bring their numbers, and that can be good. Do you think that this is really what this movement needs to gain steam?
Well, I think the more allies you bring to it, the better. And I think the reason that the union was actually fairly quick to join, and a lot of other groups are excited by this, is because finally someone's taking the fight and taking real action to Wall Street. I mean, the Tea Party came out and said they were against the bailouts, and they never did a damn thing about it. If they were, you know, earnest and honest with what their stated goals were, I actually think the Tea Party movement could have been great. And I don't mind conservatives coming at this issue from the right. I welcome it. I think that'd be fantastic. But they immediately got misdirected. So when someone finally goes to take on Wall Street and say, stop corrupting our politics and stop getting all of the advantages because you've bought all of the politicians, well, then that's why people get excited. That's why the unions go, hey, yeah, that's what we were saying. We're on board. That's why progressive groups go, hey, that's what we were saying, and that's why they're on board. We're just waiting for the conservative side, because they should be on board with this, too.
Well, at the same time, and you were just talking about the Tea Party, and you've said that they've been co-opted by large Republican donors, so maybe that's why you don't hear about Wall Street from them anymore, about bailouts anymore. With progressives really latching on to Occupy Wall Street and with unions joining on, do you worry that Occupy Wall Street will be co-opted by Democrats and establishment unions, as some have criticized and argued?
Right. I'm not worried too much about the unions, because the unions are, you know, so crushed by corporate power at this point. I think they're just looking for allies. I don't think that they're, I mean, even if they look to co-opt it, I don't think that they'd be able to pull that off. The Democrats I'm more concerned about, because they're going to come in with their fake populism, as they always do. And the president has, you know, started to shift to the left now that the election is rolling around. When he had, you know, 3 years to govern, he, you know, was incredibly dismissive and disdainful of the left. But now that he needs votes, all of a sudden he's a big populist. You know, so I'm worried about Democrats coming to co-opt this thing. Why? If they actually meant what they said, I would love it. But oftentimes they talk the talk, but they never walk the walk. So if all they do is, oh, yeah, give me your votes, oh, then I'm going to sit on my ass and do nothing, then that would be horrible. And I hope that doesn't happen.
So then, because from what I understand from a lot of reporters that have been covering this, is that this group is really diverse. It's not just progressives or just lefties. I mean, it's anti-establishment. It's people that are disillusioned by Republicans and Democrats and the political system. It is progressives. It's socialists. It's Ron Paul supporters. It's some Republicans. So where do you channel that? Because you're saying not Democrats, and, you know, I don't think that this group is saying that Republicans are the answer either.
Yeah, no. Look, my estimation is that 99% of the Republican Party is bought, and at least 80% of the Democratic Party is bought. So I'm certainly not going to go to the Republican side, because that's worse, but it's not like the Democratic side is the answer. No. We need to take it to the state level. We need to take it to the local level and demand that all those different states get on board, in my opinion, for a constitutional amendment to say that that is it. Corporations are not human beings. They do not have speech rights. They cannot buy our politicians. If we can all unite around that idea, which I think is both a conservative and liberal and libertarian idea, that's the one thing we should all agree on. Stop cronyist capitalism, right, where they create these monopolies, etc. If we can rally around that and we can actually get an amendment passed, then a lot of these problems start to get solved. So I hope that the right, the center, everyone joins this movement, and that we can do it together. So
what do you exactly see, though, as being how that happens? What kind of an amendment? You say every individual state should pass one, or how exactly does it work?
Well, the logistics of it is certainly not easy, right? Mm-hmm. But everybody thinks it's impossible, and I'm positive that it is not impossible. I think it's entirely possible if we direct energy in the right direction. So one way that it could happen is that the different states would call for a constitutional convention. That's a way of getting around Congress, because Congress is so bought, if you ask them for an amendment that would take away some of their power, they'd laugh at you. Go, oh, no way! My buddies at ExxonMobil tells me that's not a good idea, and they sign my paychecks. So the only way around Congress is calling for a constitutional convention, which then calls for the amendment, and then which then gets ratified by the states. So that's done purely at the state level, so we can avoid the total and utter corruption of Washington, D.C.
It's that old saying, all politics is local. It sounds like you think everything needs to move back to that. At the same time, I want to talk a little bit more about what critics are saying, because we've heard a lot of them come out on the right, people like Herman Cain, people like Bill O'Reilly on Fox News, saying that these protesters, if they don't have jobs, they can just blame themselves, because if you try to get a job in this country, you know, you can, and if you want to get rich, you can. But then today, new jobs numbers came out. The jobless rate is the same. It's 9.1% for September, and the broader U6, which I think is more interesting, because this is the broader measure of unemployment, which has people who have stopped looking for work or can't find full-time jobs but want them. This rose to 16.5%, the highest rate this year that we've seen at all. How can people make this argument that people who want jobs can all get them?
Well, first of all, they're incredibly callous. I mean, as I saw that Bill O'Reilly segment, I thought, why doesn't he just take, like, crumpets and throw it at the people and be like, let them eat cake, here, have the scones. If you just want to be rich, don't people come and hand you money? Yeah, Bill, if you suck up to ExxonMobil and to Goldman Sachs, et cetera, yeah, there's a lot of money in it for you, right? But if you don't do that on television, it's hard to earn a living, right? And so here's a perfect way of thinking about it. So unemployment used to be around 4 or 5%. Then it shot up to 9 to 10%. So about a 5% difference, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that was started in the 2008 crash. Now, do we think, and does Bill O'Reilly think, that 5% of the population all of a sudden got really lazy? Like in the middle of an economic crash, they're like, oh, you know what? Well, let's all take a load off and just sit on the couch. No, they lost their jobs because of the crash that your buddies on Wall Street started, right? And they're desperately looking for jobs. We know because there are facts behind it. For every one job opening, there's 4.3 applicants. That means they are all applying, and there's not enough jobs. And that's because of the debacle that the banks caused that Fox News is so desperately trying to cover up for them.
Oh, and speaking of Fox News, we do have a special occasion for the network. It is their 15th anniversary, and they put together some videos documenting what they call, quote, the evolution, and celebrating many, many more years of bringing fair and balanced news coverage, you know, I guess, to viewers. Do you have a birthday wish for Fox News, Cenk?
Yeah, that they go out of business. Now, look, to be fair, they've done an amazing job in getting viewers. You got to call it like it is, and that's definitely the case. And they've got a strong ratings, and they've got strong revenue. And I think Ailes, as much as I can't agree with him almost on any issue, and as much as I think he's a propagandist, he is a very good propagandist. And he's done an amazing job with that network. You know, if all they have to do, in my opinion, is just admit that they're not actually doing news. If they called it Fox Opinion, I wouldn't even have any problem with it. Sure, there should be a conservative point of view on television. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Just label it, have some truth in advertising, and that's all.
There you go. Happy birthday, Fox. That was Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks.